I've always taken pride in being a Trump supporter. You know, he presented himself as a man for the people. He's listening to the will of the people. He's this one man army fighting the big machine of the media who truly does lie to the people. Okay, the media who truly does indoctrinate, the media who truly does, if we're talking about this in terms of the black community, the media who truly does tell black people that we're somehow some kind of victims, that we're thugs and you should behave as such, and they'll run cover for black thuggery, they'll run cover for black degeneracy as a whole. And Trump stood as the juxtapose force opposite to that. Someone who was going to dismantle and destroy the media, get rid of these rich assholes who pay for political influence and create corruption throughout our system. Trump ran as someone in stark contrast to what those people were, what they represented. The pushers of ratchetness, the pushers of the LGBT, the pushers of homosexuality, the pushers of feminism, the pushers of abortion. Trump ran as someone who would destroy, dismantle that, and replace it with what the will of the people was. And in return, obviously, that type of system just being destroyed, that type of system being dismantled, would make it easy for people like me, people like you, normal black people to come in and start actually telling black people the truth. Now that Trump has been in office since January, it hasn't even been 6 months. I don't think that's what we're gonna get. I'll be very happy to admit. Well, not very happy. I'm kind of very sad to admit. I We were probably lied to by Donald Trump, and what I mean by that is, he ran as the populist president. He ran saying, "Oh, if you're getting any benefits from the federal government, unless you're doing some type of corruption, unless you're taking advantage of government benefits when you shouldn't be, he's going to cut that. If you're an illegal collecting food stamps and collecting $600 a month in welfare, he's going to cut that for them. But good Americans, nothing would happen to us." That was just a lie, because recently there's been a proposal of a big beautiful bill by Donald Trump. In this big, beautiful bill, there's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars cut from Medicaid. That's what people get when they're sick. Why would you cut that? I mean, I can understand if you cut that for an illegal immigrant because they're not a citizen. They haven't paid into the system. But why would you cut Medicaid to a poor person with cancer? Doesn't make any sense. Not only is he going to cut that, now him cutting food stamps, I actually think that's a good idea, because you actually have that's one of those systems of corruption. Well, that's one of those things where that's prone to corruption, because you have people that become lifelong recipients of stuff like food stamps when it should be something that's short term and temporary. So him cutting food stamps, I don't have as much of a problem with it. But student loans. And this is what I truly don't like about this big beautiful bill thing. 7 out of 10 black people who graduate college, for better or for worse, because you do have a lot of black dummies who get through college, I get that. But 7 out of 10 black people kind of rely on their financial aid in order to go to college. He's proposing cutting that program entirely. We're going to read some of the numbers, and if he was going to cut that and just cut it, and I'd have a problem with it, but it wouldn't make me angry. I'd say, that's kind of just the Republican thing. Maybe we'll get a Democrat back in office that re-extends these benefits. But not only is he cutting access to things like Medicaid, access to things like student loans, not only is he cutting that for poor people, he recently just signed off on giving Israel more than $12 billion to Israel to commence a genocide. So you mean to tell me that the federal government has money to give Israel $12 billion, but you can't help some poor sick lady with cancer that's dying that can't afford to pay for medications. That doesn't really make too much sense. And had I known that, I would not have voted for Kamala Harris. Don't get me wrong. Nobody wants to vote for a baby killer that promotes homosexuality. That's the epitome of feminism. That ideology would have been just as deadly as cutting as the cancer. Okay, so me not being for Trump's big beautiful bill and thus turning away from Trump, that is in no way an endorsement of the Democratic Party and their horrible policies, which disproportionately destroy black people. And you could argue probably even worse than some of these items within the big beautiful bill. Okay, so this is in no way a defense of the Democrats, but he ran as this populist figure. I'm a man for the people. I'm going to help people. I'm not going to cut your Medicaid in no uncertain terms. Kind of harkens back to George H.W. Bush when he said, read my lips, no new taxes. And Trump was kind of in those uncertain terms throughout the campaign trail and said, I will not cut Medicaid. Within the first year in office, his landmark legislative idea is to cut Medicaid by over more than $400 million, to cut access to black people going to school and at least having an opportunity to get out of the hood. And that's what pisses me off. If you don't give these niggas the opportunity to at least go to school and at least try to make something of themselves, where do you think they're going to turn? That's just going to lead to an increase in thuggery. That's just going to lead to an increase in ratchetness and crime. It's just going to exacerbate the problem. I don't see why that would be a viable solution. So it's like Trump is telling people, hey, don't go to, I'm going to cut your access to college. You're not able to go to college, or at least the government ain't going to pay for it. Figure out how to pay for it, nigga. They're hiring at McDonald's, nigga. Well, we're going to cut that. But then I'll give people like Larry Hoover a part, and I'll give the GDs, if you do go to prison, bet on the 0.000000001% chance that I'll give you a pardon. Absolutely sick, absolutely ridiculous. That's not something I can support. I'm sorry. I don't believe in killing off the poor. Okay? I don't believe in telling poor people, you have to pay for this. You have to pay $10,000 for this diabetes medication, or else you're gonna die. That's not something I can support. That's demonic. That's actually evil. Now, if you got some lazy motherfucker on the food stamps, I'm sorry. I'm okay with cutting the food stamps, actually. But if they have kids, are you really going to punish the kids? Are we going to let the kids starve? So I'm really hesitant about cutting the food stamps, too. But, I think we should put in food stamps where you can only get healthy foods. No more ice cream. No more snack cakes, Debbie cakes and all that, and honey buns. You know what these niggas like to eat. None of that. You have to get chicken, a little beef, fruits, veggies, no sodas, maybe a couple of juices, no Kool-Aid. I think food stamps should be reformed, but to cut it entirely, I think that's kind of cruel. And then to cut access to student loans for graduates and undergraduates. I think if you have I think we should reform college. You shouldn't have 4-year indoctrination mills. But if someone wants to go to college to better their career and better themselves, I think that's a good idea. Now, like I said, with Trump being the cultural icon, the cultural force to be reckoned with that he was, I thought he would change the indoctrination part of college. Maybe he'd get in, and he'd stop this forced teaching of LGBT nonsense. He stopped this forced feminism. But no, he's saying that no, let's just cut it entirely, which would stop the career paths for a lot of black people. So that's not something I support. I can't continue to support Trump. Am I going to start making anti-Trump videos? Probably at some point. Probably at some point. You know, him and Elon Musk, they got a big beef going now. I'll say this and I'll close. They have a big beef going now where Elon Musk tweeted and said the reason why Trump hasn't released those Epstein files is because Trump is in the Epstein files. No, crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. So, you know, we'll keep watching and we'll see what happens. I hope the big beautiful. It barely passed through the House of Representatives. You know, just a bill on Capitol Hill. It's just a bill on Capitol Hill. Right now, it's not law. Right now, it's not law. It got through by one vote. It made it past by only one vote in the House of Representatives. Right now, we're waiting to see what happens in the Senate. Nonetheless, I will let you know what happens. Keep tuning into Woke Progressive. But overall, this is a horrible bill. It's going to include tax cuts for the rich, more funding to Israel. Just a horrible bill. Horrible bill altogether. And I guess we'll talk about it more in detail in another video. But nonetheless, thank you for watching. And remember to like, subscribe, share, and as always, stay woke.